Welcome to U.S. History Notes 6.3. These are going to cover George H.W. Bush's presidency from 1988 to 1992. This is George Bush Sr., who was our 41st President of the United States. So his son then becomes the 43rd President of the United States. Sorry, I had to count a little bit there. But George H.W. Bush, or George Bush Sr., is president from 1988 to 1992. He actually had been Ronald Reagan's vice president. So a lot of the policies he has are actually just a continuation of Reagan's policies and Reagan's presidency. So we see a lot of similarities between those. However, under his presidency, 1989, we see the fall of the Berlin Wall. So we talked about this in class, but we really see the Berlin Fall, that symbol of communism, that symbol of the split between the East and the West. We see that crumble. It's the physical manifestation of that term Iron Curtain that we talked about. And we see this change now. And this is really what we call the end of the Cold War. Here in this picture, you see George Bush right here. And over on the left here is Gorbachev, who was the leader of the Soviet Union when this happened. So this was a huge deal, and the leadership, we see both sides talking to each other. You see in this picture, happy together, and that leads to the dissolution of the Soviet bloc, or the Soviet Union coming apart. So if you look at this map here in the upper left corner, the Soviet Union used to be all of these countries. So when it was called the USSR, or Soviet Union, all of these were part of one country. The dissolution of the Soviet bloc means that it dissolves into multiple other countries. So you still have Russia as the large country, but all these other countries also exist. This actually can be traced to, currently you've heard some things about the Ukraine and Russia probably. Well, right there you can trace it back. They used to be part of the Soviet Union, both countries. In addition to that, during this time period, George Bush talks about this thing called the New World Order. So we no longer have a Cold War. We no longer have us against Russia. So what's this New World Order? What does our new foreign policy look like? We have to redefine it. We have to create a post-Cold War foreign policy. And our big focus in this New World Order becomes human rights. And so we see things like Tiananmen Square in China. So a student protest in China where these tanks, see this little guy down here? They ran him over. So students who were protesting, asking for more democracy in China, not getting their rights. How does the U.S. react to that? Here we're talking about Noriega in Panama and the drug issues, the drug thugs, and so what should the U.S. do about Noriega? Should we go in and take care of that? So we're really looking at human rights violations and what is the U.S. role in the world with human rights violations. We also continue to look at the Middle East and Middle Eastern policy that started in the Cold War, often between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. So this expands. From 90 to 91, we have what's called Operation Desert Storm, or sometimes referred to as the Persian Gulf War. This is because we gotta find our countries here. Iraq, there we go, invaded this area called Kuwait. And when Iraq invaded Kuwait, it's not a very good map. Here we go. There's Kuwait down here. This whole thing is Iraq. That's why I was having trouble. So when Iraq invaded Kuwait, okay, I may have gone outside of Iraq there as well. But when they invaded Kuwait, the U.S. stepped in to help Kuwait. Basically, it was a boundary dispute, and part of that had to do with oil. So the U.S. sent in planes, we sent in tanks, Scud missiles, we all heard about Scud missiles during that time, to stop this invasion. Here you actually see, these are oil wells that are on fire. That's what you're seeing. Can't really see that one, but you can see the smoke from it. So huge investment of military for us against Iraq. The Iraqis pulled back. We counted it as a win. It was never actually a war. It was really a very short skirmish. once the U.S. went in. So really, that's kind of Bush's foreign policy. So domestically, in the U.S., what happened? Well, the economy tanked. So we had been enjoying some good economic booms during the 80s. What we saw in the end of the 80s is the economy completely tanked. If we look at this cartoon, deficit forecast, $132 billion in deficit. And so during the election of 88, George H.W. Bush had promised no new taxes. He's even very famous for saying, "Read my lips, no new taxes." See here, and then he ended up having to lie. He had to raise taxes to meet that deficit, and people got really upset over that. So then, this happened shortly before the election of 1992. Well, in 92, we actually had a three-way race. We had George W. Bush, who was the Republican, we had Perot, the Independent, and Bill Clinton, the Democrat. And so what happened in this three-way race? Well, you have three candidates. It was actually, at times, very entertaining to watch their debates and things. I love this time picture. He's back, and there's Perot down there. But Perot, his whole argument was based on economics and really undermined Bush and Bush's economic plan because Perot really appealed to the conservative voters who wanted a balanced budget. And so Perot was able to split the vote. So a lot of Republican voters actually voted for Perot. So they ended up splitting the vote, which means your winner becomes Bill Clinton. And our next president and our next set of notes